it's the payments use case. All the banks are like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? We can't be left behind because it's the first thing that really attacks their core business. Their current clients are going to have use cases around stablecoin payments somewhere in their portfolio, for sure. They will have it. They're going to want to do it.
Welcome back to Total Value Unlocked, the Hiveman podcast, where we explore the technologies and ideas shaping the future of blockchain and digital asset industry. I'm your host, Matt Zhang. Today, I'm joined by Brett Tejpaul. As head of Coinbase Institutional, he has a front row seat at what institutional investor really looks like beyond the headlines. We'll talk about how institutional participation is evolving, what's next for the crypto infrastructure, and where new structure like digital asset treasuries, like AVAX Ones, fit into the broader market. Before we begin, as always, nothing in this episode and discussion should be considered financial or investment advice. For more information, please visit our website or contact Hiveman directly. Brett, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Matt, thanks for having me.
Yeah. For those who might not be as close to Coinbase Institutional, can you starting by giving us a quick overview of your role there and what the platform covers today?
Sure. Along with my co-head, Greg Tusar, who runs product engineering and design, we lead the institutional business at Coinbase. And so what that is three pillars. The first pillar are marketplaces. So Coinbase is probably best known for its US spot exchange that has 65% or so market share. But we also run three other exchanges. A CFTC regulated futures exchange, a Bermudian-based international exchange on which we trade perps and futures and spot and kind of everything else. And then we recently acquired Deribit, which you know well, which has had 85% market share in options, and they trade perps and options and spot as well. So that's the first pillar. Obviously, the retail and consumer part of Coinbase is the biggest client of the spot exchange, but those are the places where everyone trades. The second pillar is the main pillar, and that's what I probably spend most of my time on, and that's called Coinbase Prime. And the short version is it's the nearest equivalent to a traditional prime broker, although it has crypto-enabled features on it. So you can buy and sell and stake and store. And then we also have our principal financing business, which is integrated there. And really the idea is that is the main institutional on-ramp for everyone. There's another emerging pillar, which I'm going to come back to in a second. Actually, let's just do it now. Over the past couple of years, we've acquired 250 or so clients that we're now bucketing as clients of crypto as a service. So all the things that we've built, whether it be wallet infrastructure or custody or brokerage, we're offering those as kind of like the pivot of AWS from Amazon, where we offer crypto infrastructure to a wide universe of people who want to help their clients embark on a crypto journey. And so that would include people like, PayPal and JP Morgan, and I can go through a long list. But we have so much adoption in that space that all those tools that we built for Prime, we're now externalizing for developers to use. And then the last pillar.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I want to definitely come back on the third pillar.
Yeah, we should come back to that. And then the third pillar is Coinbase Asset Management, which is a business that we first invested in some 3 or 4 years ago, and then completed full acquisition a couple years back. And that business manages a few billion just institutional money. And last week launched a couple new products. One of them is a Bitcoin yield product. So lots of people are already long Bitcoin, but they want to be able to generate excess return above and beyond just the price of Bitcoin. So those are the three pillars, and there's a myriad of roles and responsibilities beyond that, but that's what we've built.
Yeah, I mean, you've been at Coinbase now for what, like over 5 years?
Five and a
And
half. Who's
five and a
counting?
half,
All six.
congratulations. And your team has grown into one of the most important touch points for institutional capitals in crypto period. How has your mandate evolved as this market's matured in the last few cycles?
Yeah, well, when I first got hired by Brian and Emily, I was really just a single person, and at a company that was 99.9% a consumer retail company. So now we're a pretty significant part of the company in terms of headcount. If you fully attribute all of our infrastructure partners and cross-functional people, we're a few hundred, maybe knocking on the door of 400 or 500 people. And really, at the beginning, all we had, Matt, was really just a custody product. That's it.
Right.
And so, really, it was the opportunity of a lifetime to be sitting there with a blank sheet of paper and build towards Brian's vision. And we sort of thought about all that accumulated experience that you and I have in traditional
Mhm.
markets and what it takes for institutions to invest. And we started building. We did 5 acquisitions. We built most everything, but 5 major acquisitions along the way. And then we built, what we've got today. So my mandate has always been the same, which is to bring institutional capital, into crypto and onto Coinbase. But the ways in which we do it has expanded tremendously, as our product capabilities have expanded.
And kudos to you and congratulations, Brad, because I remember 5 years ago, one of us still at City before set up Hivemind, we've been talking about this, and you always have that vision, but the execution is really differentiate, right? Because, when the last 4 years, we went through what, FTX, SVB, all of this type of stuff, and be able to stay true to your North Star and institutions are coming, and finally they came this year, and now it's the time to really harvest and, accelerating that growth engine.
Yeah.
And which is really, I want to dive right into the next topic. I mean, this year, institutional adoptions feels materially different than the previous years, not just in the narrative, but actually in execution. Like, what do you think changed the most in how large allocators and corporates are actually engaging with you?
The center of the crypto universe, we can argue, we can debate, Nick. Where
Sure.
is it globally? Is it Asia with active traders? Is it the US? Um, for me, we're really anchored in the US market for sure. As you said, we've had a couple bumps along the way. But we've also had some sort of absolutely standout activity. And thinking back in terms of the institutional narrative, at the beginning, there were venture funds and early adopters and hedge funds and early macro traders, some early US endowments that came in along with high net worth. Then there was like this very splashy and notable MSTR and strategy. And I kind of thought 3, 4, 5 years ago that we'd see that moment that the rest of the corporates would come in, and it didn't really happen. And I thought that the payments use case a couple of years ago would really accelerate, and it didn't really happen. So what's happened? Because now everything's happening. What
Hmm.
happened is I think from a U.S. perspective, it was the new administration and the speed with which that they've kept the campaign pledges, and Genius Act has come, and we've got market structure on the table. But the speed with which that's happened, I mean, now I'm just back from London, by the way, and having lived and worked there for 12 years, I can tell you for the first time in my 6 years at Coinbase, I'm saying that London and Europe together, if I'm allowed to group them, is on fire. And this is all leading up to the single catalyst. And the single catalyst is that we have this US regulatory the Genius Act by itself. So making stablecoins legal and the first really big move to make sure that digital crypto, whatever you call it, is going to become mainstream. And that's been the moment that rest of the world has said, oh my gosh, we had a lead over the US in trying to put our flags up as a crypto capital or a financial center to attract crypto investment. But all of a sudden, in one move, the U.S. has kind of leapfrogged, or seemingly so, everyone else. And that's been the moment, Matt, that the first movers have been here for a while. They feel validated, but it's everyone else now. So it's all, who it is? It is um, the rest of the global SIFI crowd
Mhm.
that hasn't already made announcements or activated. I'm leaving names out because I have to be, for the right reasons. But there's only a small percentage, actually, a small group, let's say 5 to 7, okay, of that group that have actually made meaningful investments and through, post the FTX, genre. So that means the rest of the SIFI banks and then everyone else. And
Right.
so everyone's looking now and saying, oh my gosh, look, uh, these ETFs weren't just a trade. At one point, someone was saying to me, hey, Brett, when I was asking one of the big banks, now that you've seen BlackRock and Invesco and Fidelity, like, what else are you waiting for? And this person was dismissive and he said, Brett, that was just a trade. So I said, not a trade, it's a trend, man. This is the moment that crypto is getting into the disruption of financial services. And I said, we're so big, it's just a trade. But now BlackRock's come back and said we're going to tokenize,
Mhm.
the entirety of our many trillion, ETF fund platform. And tokenization has captured the mind. So what's happened is this one catalyst of making stablecoins has allowed boardrooms, CEOs, CIOs across the world to connect the dots with crypto and saying, okay, the better, faster, this new financial rails, and all of a sudden payments cases are exploding, tokenization is exploding, investment continues to, chug on. And so there's a whole new swath of companies and innovators, and everyone's trying to catch up, which is really why we sat back for a second and then said, okay, we've got all these on-ramps. Remember, I described you can go direct to exchange, we have the Prime platform, and then we have asset management. But that's really the moment where I've said, am I really going to have 200 of the largest, financial services challengers, whether they be, new banks, crypto banks, or incumbents? Are they all really going to build wallet infrastructure? Are they all really going to
Right.
build their own custody? I doubt it. And so
It's like not everybody going to have a cloud service, right? You have
right.
to actually use somebody. Actually, the economy of scale, having a large central part, is actually very, very efficient and useful for the industry. But Brett, that's something I want to double down on because you basically saying that the catalyst for this issue adoption this time around is a very supportive backdrop of legislation and regulation. I 100% agree. But when you have institutional investors coming in via stablecoin as a catalyst, what do you think that really motivates them to be the first stop? Are they looking for, say, diversification from a macro perspective? Do they looking for on-chain additional yield opportunities? Or are they looking for the infrastructure exposure that's on-chain? Like, what attracts them the most?
It's kind of funny. You and I both were at, investment banking places for all of our sins. And in those many years that we were there, like you and I were both innovators, right? We would talk to clients and say, "What is it you want?" And then we would go package them, right?
Yeah.
We would say, I'll give you exposure to CLOs, or I'll give you exposure to leveraged loans, and I'll do it in this format." And mostly it was the investment banks kind of structuring products and then sort of pushing them and saying like, "Hey, this is the thing that gives you, exposure." Interestingly, in this crypto world, it's actually been more the owners of capital and people that are invested in Bitcoin, BlackRock, people who have unmet investor need, right? And it's the asset management world that's actually the creator of product, which is
Right.
it's a different paradigm, right? And so what's happening is people who are using stable coins to transact are saying, I'd like some yield. So find ways for us to reward and yield. Find ways for us to sweat our capital a little bit more, right? Find ways for us to earn yield in our Bitcoin. So it's really the investment case that's drawing people in. And then we were saying, hey, we have all the tools to help you safely deploy your capital or create, use our asset manager to write covered calls or make loans on your behalf for that incremental return.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about, Brett, like what's working and what's motivates them. I want to ask about what are the biggest problem challenges those institutions are still facing today? And how are these questions and problems different, say, than 2 years ago?
Mm, 2 years ago, I would say there was still the jury was out in terms of whether the asset class had staying power
Sure.
after it suffered a series of, unfortunate episodes. And, I've never seen that answer, a big question, looming question, be answered so clearly for an emerging asset class, because even with the last administration, BlackRock came in and asked for approval to do a Bitcoin and, eventually Ethereum ETF in the last regime. And now they have, at one point over 100 billion in assets, which is the best performing, the IBIT's best performing ETF, of all time. And so what's different now isn't so much answering the question of is the man still going to be persistent?
Yeah,
It's
it's here to stay. It's definitely here to stay,
it's
but
here to
it's how it's
stay.
evolved.
And again, what is evidence of that? Well, how about U.S. legislation and law? Like, how about making stablecoins legal? Now, the biggest problem actually we have is I don't have enough salespeople and product people that are able to keep pace with everyone who all of a sudden has been given the mandate of, hey, get that digital guy back in here, get that crypto person back in here. Where is that working group? And what is the plan for, what is our plan to be active in the space? And so seemingly everyone has that same deliverable. I mean, post the Trump election, you and I talked about there being, war rooms set up, at all the incumbents, saying like, what's our plan on crypto? How are we going to act? Everyone had a Kodak moment, right? Is our business going to be disrupted by this technology? Now that BlackRock has actually come out, not only did they do the ETF thing, but if you saw in their last quarterly letter
Learning.
uh,
Yep.
and earnings, they actually included deliberately um, maybe a statement of intent or curiosity around tokenizing their ETF platform. So if you ignored the first thing, and it's the very first thing was the Bitcoin investment, then you ignore BlackRock and ETFs. I guess you can keep ignoring the client base, and you can ignore demand, and then I think you'll find yourself largely irrelevant.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about a couple of times regarding how important regulations, legislations now in the law are. You probably have one of the most vantage point talking to the DCs, and let the audience know a little bit of your conversation there, like how you thinking that regulators and legislators in their mind, what's the front of their priorities and approach, and they're trying to address.
Yeah, for a long time, I think crypto didn't have a super um, easy to understand use case outside investment. And so now that stablecoins are here, I think the proliferation of use cases around them is kind of obvious to everyone. So the nature of my conversations in DC has changed remarkably. So now it's gone from, can we do this? Can we sort of get some sort of cover for
Right.
being able to do something innovative? It's changed from Brett, can you go faster? Can you show us evidence? Now that we've done our part, we're making this legal. We're giving you the regulatory framework. Bring the innovation. Show me how you can capital conform quickly. So there are plentiful use cases about meme coins and different things, but I'll just pause on that for a second. Did you see XYZ coin, made whatever billion over the weekend? But those are examples for you and I when we think of issuers and investors, and we think about people who have capital and people who want to use capital, and you think about capital formation in the context of crypto. It's not intermediated by bankers. It doesn't have the same sort of barriers to entry, but we still have reputable people, meeting in markets. It's amazing. So capital formation, so demonstrating that we can still act responsibly and remake, redraw markets, make them work more efficiently is super exciting. So
And
tokenization of equities is one of those themes, right?
Totally. And that's one of the areas which I'm personally very excited about. Like, but with all of this being said, like what can be said for the people who are still waiting on the sideline? Like, what do you think there's still institutions that are not ready compared with the people who are driving and lead sort of like the initiatives? Are these you think is the mandates, flexibilities, or infrastructure readiness, or internal convictions, or what's the reason that having people still on the sideline? They're probably FOMO at this some point, but what separates them apart from the people who are already doing things?
I guess you could say I'm trying to come up with a credible reason to stay on the sidelines, but I'm struggling a little bit. I guess you could say I'd like to see the market structure bill come into effect. From my own point of view, I think it will, and I think it'll support vertically integrated businesses. I mean, part of the reason of we don't have to go too far down the rabbit hole, but one of the great things about being able to, send things and settle things at the speed of light is speed, efficiency, and scale. So I don't think you want to break that up in ways that'll break the customer experience,
Yeah.
So I don't think that's helpful. But I'm not sure. Not everyone has to not everyone has the capital to do investment in crypto,
Right.
and not everyone has a business that will necessarily be threatened, by it. So you could be I don't know, you could be somewhere in the financial ecosystem where perhaps your business won't be touched by it. It's possible. I struggle to come up with examples at this point. So the truth is, Matt, I don't have enough time to debate with that crew. I kind of usually keep the dissenters close to me so I
Yeah.
can actually focus on the things that matter most. And when they have really credible arguments about, is it efficient? Can I get best execution? Is it really safe? Are there other credible people, in this space? All those things, I've knocked down those things one by one by one by one by one by one for years. It's not to say that there aren't, you know, others that may come up. But right now, I'm turning my focus away from the dissenting crowd because I've figured that like a lot has been solved, and I'm focusing on those that really want to do adoption.
A good thing is the people who's already over the hump that are wanting to do this is in exponentially grow. So as you said, you don't even
Mm.
have enough salespeople to cover those people. So I guess that's a good problem to have, right? Worrying about the ones that hasn't got convinced, and hopefully eventually it's a one-way train. So, um, Brad, you mentioned about the different pillars. I do want to circle back on this. So
Mm.
as you said, we've seen Coinbase from a pure institutional side, from pure a custody play, now into really a one-stop shop, a powerhouse that including financing, derivatives, asset management, even benchmarks and all of that. What what are the product areas right now that you think have the most impact for institutional demand? And what's the next on the innovation roadmap that you have for Coinbase Institutional?
Mhm. So again, in our careers, I'm kind of thinking that your audience will probably include a lot of the people that we used to work with. I hope so. If
Yep.
so, hi everyone. But I do think that it's informative to think about like what our strategy has been, and the strategy is actually not entirely dissimilar to the broad strategy within investment banking capital markets, which is to say, if you're going to be relevant to the biggest clients, you actually need the ability to fulfill most of their needs, most if not all of their needs. So their needs will be to buy, sell, store, stake, finance, all those things. So we didn't have all of those things until this last acquisition of Deribit. So we were late to scale internationally. We were late to enter derivatives as well. We were late to enter options. And so if you think about a fully formed business that has all the component parts of what we need at the base layer, you need spot, swaps, options, derivative. You need all those things. You need finance.
Yep.
And then from there, you can do, the next generation of products, just like the same, the same trend that we've seen in ETFs, right? First bring the asset class, then bring derivatives and options on top of the asset class, then bring structured products on top of all those things. So that's been our strategy. And so when you think about finally for us, we're still integrating, Deribit from a client experience perspective. But when you have all of those things, okay, so what ties them all together? A singular prime platform. So it's easy, it's safe, it's trusted, but it's all those things across all those products, right?
Yep.
And then critically, if you have portfolio financing across all of those things, position recognition across all of those things, then you get the benefits of margin. You can only have it with us. So there's a lot of exciting things to come. A lot of business will, I think, wind up being sticky. We made it modular so you can do one thing and not another. But the bet, which is playing out for us, is that you'll opt to actually do all the things with us because it's the best place to do it.
Yep. That's very well said. I want to switch in topic real quick to AVAX One. As you know, HiveMind recently led the capital raising strategy for the DAT, and will serve as the asset manager, and very much welcoming you involved as a strategic advisor. Very excited about this. What initially drew your personal capacity to this project, and what makes this particular DAT compelling among all the others you see in the market?
Honestly, I have to say my criteria is kind of like old school, which is find credible people who you trust and then do things with them. So John Woo, are at the top of my list of people who I think are credible, have long track records of doing good things, and are committed to innovating, and people who I think can attract capital. So. It's all about you, my friend.
No, thank you. Appreciate that.
Secondarily, it's for me also about AVAX. So, John was probably one of the first people. You and John were when I was thinking about even going into this space. You and I talked, if you remember, and I was going, hey, I think I might leave the cocoon of TradFi and try this entrepreneurial thing. What do you think?
Yep.
John was already, heavily invested. You were personally invested, in the space, and John started to tell me about AVAX. So I remember, the first principles, and then I met Goon early on in my education, which is still going on, in the space. So I've held them in high regard for a long time. It took me quite a while, to be honest, to realize the differentiation, because I think I've listened to a couple of the podcasts from John and others, but you need to be a little bit of a comp sci engineer to understand subnets and privacy and customization to the
Yep.
extent that you're able to. But I do think the subnets and the customization for me are probably and in Ethereum compatibility are probably the top three things that attracted me. And the fact that, I don't know when and how, and institutional capital is going to finally be here in enormous size. But, using public blockchains, I know is that there's lots of debates around these things, but having this customizable layer where you can actually have permission private blockchains and do great and interesting things that actually need to be done out of
Yep.
plain sight is brilliant. And I think that AVAX was onto it super early. And they've done, actually, you and I both, for your viewers, I don't know, but we both ran structured product origination businesses and trading. We both did like the most complex stuff there is.
Yep.
And so in the world of TradFi, that is the apex of complexity. And now we're doing, a similar thing within crypto, and you need blockchains and you need composability and all the things to be able to do something similar but different, in the crypto world. So people first, and then, of course, those people happen to choose great technology, and I'm excited about the future.
Yeah, look, it was very well said, Brett, and thanks for the kind word. I think, right, echoing everything you said, right, between you, myself, Zhang Wu, Anthony Scaramucci, we all come from a very similar background, institutional investment banking. We know what the banks and financial institutions needs, right? They don't just need, like, obviously need very good technologies, but they also need something catered to their own needs in terms of privacy, security, customization. That's the reason why I'm really, really excited about what Avalanche are able to revolutionize the infrastructure layer all financial institutions and build this on-chain financial economy. So very much looking forward to bring this to success, working together with you. Take a step back, like how do you think about the function of a DAT, and what roles can they play that have ETF and trust on on-chain funds like out there? Like how do you see this entire markets evolve in the next couple of years where you have a different type of structures all coming up trying to offer institutional investors access to crypto?
Well, we just touched upon it, but worth expanding. So, as I kind of admitted, if you like, or confessed, it took me a while to understand the brilliance of what Goon had built and conceived, right? It takes a little while. And so if the rest of the world or people that have capital that are willing to invest have a similar criteria, which is to find trusted people who spend a lot of time, learning and thinking, deploying and bringing things to scale, I would hope that the combination of you and Scaramucci and John and others can have conversations like this.
Yeah,
And if you haven't already been invested, it's a little tougher, right? To hurry, open an account, figure out how to protect your account, put in the best in class security, then go out and buy this token, but perhaps not that token. It takes quite a lot, right?
right.
So I think if we're able to articulate clearly the use cases and the future and explain what we think over time will be pretty interesting returns achieved, we should be able to maybe attract capital into the DATs. It's easier. You can call your broker. It's a paved path. It's like ETFs, right?
Yep.
It's easier, right? You still get Coinbase and 90% you have Coinbase custody. So whether you buy it through,
Yep.
BlackRock or Invesco, I mean, I don't care. It finds its way to us. So I think the DATS is another place where it's an easy on-ramp, for people. So I think that makes sense. Another way for the DATs to be, relevant is going to be, you know, going back to the brilliance of Avalanche. You can do pretty customizable things, and there are already some use cases that involve our former stuff, which is CLOs that
Hmm.
are on.
Janice Henderson, to say least,
Yeah, it's
right?
Henderson, right?
Yep.
And so you look at that, and people, when I first came into the asset class, they're like, "Hey, Brett, you're like a CLO structuring guy. Obviously, you're going into crypto to bring that to life." And to be honest, I said I'd love to, but in terms of my priorities at Coinbase, the first thing I have to do is give you smart order routing and build a prime broker. And that for me is probably going to be like the next phase, for tokenizing and attacking something a lot more complex. And I think that we're finally here. So the
Yeah.
cool thing about Avalanche is that it took on some hard problems very early. That asset class and already structured in a liquid product and having them operate, on a blockchain, in the way imagined is a tremendous accomplishment. And plus, getting Henderson to participate in is again like it's an enormous validation, just like we had with BlackRock.
Yep. And if we fast forwarding, 5, 10 years from now, we talk a lot about the public market. We talk a lot about the on-chain economy. What do you think the full integrations between TradFi and on-chain infrastructure looks like to you? Like, what is that ultimate place is?
You know, I'm not the futurist at Coinbase, and so I have to remember what Brian, our founder, has said about that moment and play it back to as best I can. But I think the way he describes it to us is that it's possible that in the Web3 world, once we have a whole set of apps and new experiences, that it's kind of hidden from the end user that you're using blockchains at all. And
Right.
so everything is just a better overall user experience. And so he describes being able, what you can do now, send 1 cent, anywhere in the world, in 1 second, and have a world where people are doing peer-to-peer, perhaps through, on Base or, you know, any other blockchain, and aren't necessarily even know that they're traveling on crypto rails. And so I think I rely on Brian's vision of the future as opposed to mine. I'm the sort of, the day-to-day, week-to-week guy.
It's
That's
definitely an
capital.
exciting
Yeah.
vision if we can achieve that. Well, from now until that vision happens in that journey, let's say beyond regulation, what is the single most important factor you think that unlock that or accelerate that institutional adoption?
If I had to pick one today, it would be actually the manifestation of the payments use case. So it's really easy to understand, right?
Yeah.
It's everyone has a story about trying to send dollars, euros, pounds, wherever internationally, whether you're a corporate, a treasurer, a hedge fund person, doesn't matter who you are, everyone has a money movement. The naysayers will say, "Hey, Brett, but didn't you see like Swift is going to do a digital dollar and everything is really digital dollars?" Which that argument falls down every single time, right? Just go back to what you're doing day to day, hour to hour with your investment portfolio or anything. None of it is efficient. So if it could have happened and can happen, why hasn't it happened? Okay.
Right.
So the single most important thing right now, I think, is going to be the adoption of stablecoin use cases. And to bring that to life, you're going to need crypto infrastructure on both sides of that, right?
Right.
So we've already seen evidence of large global retailers actually beginning to do payments, for things, internal payments first, external payments between counterparties. It's the payments use case. And so that's why I think now that stablecoins are legal, then they're in the mainstream. That's why I think all the banks are like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? We can't be left behind because it's the first thing that really attacks their core business, right? Their current clients, right? Whether they be professional, investors or corporations. Those are the two biggest pots of capital, right? Both of them are going to have use cases around stablecoin payments, right? Somewhere in their portfolio, for sure, that they will have it. They're going to want to do it. And for the first time in forever, the banks are going to say, ooh, sorry, was that like a crypto thing or is that like a digital thing? Because we don't actually have that, but you can use our old services. And so that's the thing, Matt, that's going to be um, that is the catalyst to bring in this next wave of institutional adoption for sure.
And how do you think that's going to happen? Do you think let's just talk about the payment rail, right? You just said so. On one side, you have Swift trying to do their digital initiative. On the other side, you have Stripe launching Temple and doing other ways. Like, do you think it's the traditional financial incumbent adapting, or is the crypto native player scaling up, like to force that adoption? Like, which way you think, or somewhere in between?
It's got to be in between, right? I mean, it just if crypto will never fulfill its true potential if it's only crypto, right?
Right.
So hence it. Sorry to do shameless advertising, but that's kind of why we created the crypto as a service, right? So
Sure.
either you do it directly or you do it kind of indirectly. But to do it indirectly, that's for us means, enabling PayPal or Revolut or someone to be able to transact in the way that they want to using our infrastructure. So you have to have infrastructure on both sides. So ETFs are fine for the moment. That's like the fusion of old world and new world. Like you subscribe through a broker, old school. You pay T+1. Coinbase goes out and buys your Bitcoin, stores it for you, and then like we provide bridge loans and financing, and like the thing works, right? It works. It works at scale, but it's not like the brilliant experience, is it? Like it feels like the old one. Like call my broker, tell them to buy this.
Right.
That part's fine, but that's not a revolutionary thing. You just happen to buy a digital asset at the end of it, right? The
Right.
new thing is that's going to be exciting. So like in my messaging app, I'm going to now, send not just a
Payment.
trivial
Right.
sum, but like a big sum. And I'm going to
Mhm.
send it cross-border to facilitate this business-related, item. And I'm going to actually not just do it once, I'm going to do it like many times. And I might even have smart contracts that actually begin to do bill pay and like all these kind of simple layers, but like when aggregated together, return real cost savings and a huge increase on execution. So it's going to happen both ways. First, crypto, then like the hybrid, and then the old world catches up. But we don't want the old world to fail. We want the old
Sure.
world to adopt, right?
Sure.
So we got to keep kind of bringing everyone, along the journey with us.
Yeah. And you talked a little bit about your and Brian's vision about how the world looks like in 5 to 10 years. Tell us, like, how do you think Coinbase is going to look like in 5 years? Like, how do Coinbase go from $100 billion company to $1 trillion company? Like, how is the role to play in that vision that Brian says thinks everything going to get tokenized at the back end?
Okay, so there's only one person with the vision, that's Brian. So, and I'm not even going to try to answer that one. So I'm completely dodging that
All
question.
right, telling me how Brian thinks about in his head Coinbase should go to $1 trillion
Yeah,
company.
I listen. I think in the again, I'll just give you my crystal ball only, like doesn't go out that far.
Yeah.
So I'll just say this. I It's inconceivable to me that we're at this point in time, this late in the asset class, and that a sustained institutional adoption doesn't continue for many
Mhm.
years. And I like that old, it's a stupid saying, but I like it. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now that stablecoins are legal, you can't, the
Yeah. We
next,
crossed the Rubicon.
you cross the Rubicon. And it's not a partisan issue. It's not like one person wanted to use good tech and the other one didn't, right? So we're going to be in a world where both the investment cases keep growing, but what I actually think happens is my crypto as a service part of the business balloons. And
Right.
and that part of the business really takes off because it caters to really nimble developers that are building, entirely new apps in Web3 world. But it also caters to, teams of devs sitting at, JP Morgan that, are also, we announced, I mean, how about this as a sign of the times? We announced JP Morgan deposits, okay? JP Morgan deposits on Base.
Right.
Like, how about that as a sign of the times? Um, and people are gonna say like, "What?" Well, come read about it, or participate, in it. But once that happens, you can say that's a POC or whatever, be dismissive. But I mean, we're talking about one of the largest, most respected banks in the world teaming up with Coinbase to talk about moving their deposits on chain. Like, is it really conceivable that they're like, "Yeah, we're just kidding. It's just a fad." I don't think so. So I think that the next chapter is like super exciting. You're going to see things at seriously large scale, right? Adoption at seriously large scale. So you're going to skip this sort of interim period that we've been in for the past couple of years. Do or don't we have regulation? Is this asset class going to stick around? Now it's really going to scale. And that's where I think, just coming back to your question, that's where I think the DATs have a role to play because capital wants to get involved in the space. They want to be invested in the right things. You can't wait for 100,000 new entrants to go, open accounts and all go out and buy, AVAX. But they can write some pretty big checks into your DAT, and
Yeah.
that DAT can in turn actually begin to buy and make investments in ecosystem partners that are actually facilitating some of these. If you believe what we're talking about, you
Yeah.
probably want some exposure to some of those payment companies that are
Totally.
coming up, and that's where your DAT plays a role. So I think you have a really, really big role, an important role to play to get, be the bridge for probably the biggest owners of capital who are, you know, likely to be of an older demographic, right? And this is the path, this is the straightforward path, and you can sort of say like who is he? What's his reputation? How does it work? What are they invested in? They can listen to this and more to get smart on it, and then if they want, they can talk to Goon and all the engineers, which special experience.
Exactly. And definitely excited about that future. So, last question, Brett. We're up against the time. You spend your days talking to many smartest people in finance and tech and the convergence of the two, I guess. What's the one conversation you had recently that made you most optimistic about the space where it's heading?
Oh, that's easy. So there's a sovereign wealth fund that I speak to very regularly. Okay.
Okay.
And every conversation over the past 5 years begins with Brett, what is the killer app for crypto, and where are we on that? Because until we identify it, we're not investing. And in my last conversation, they said to me, "Okay, stablecoins are here. You don't have to answer the first question."
Okay, you move on to the second one finally after 5 years.
Yeah. So there we are.
Right. That's exciting. I mean, this shows you about how much, sometimes I was talking about this with other folks last week. From the asset locator standpoint, I don't know whether you agree or not. Like sometimes not answering the question and ignoring the asset class almost become an active decision, right? Like people needs to now hold accountable for them now to actually make a decision about whether they want to invest in the space. And I felt like just how you felt. I think the space has over the hump and we're on the other side now. Now it's not about existential threat about the industry, it's how fast we can grow and where we're growing. So very excited about that.
Yeah,
Cool.
it's funny, just like I know we're ending, but I had a former uh, boss of mine, and when I was going to Coinbase, he begged me not to go. Okay, so he said, "Please don't go." He still he was working, and I came back to him a couple years ago, and I said, "Listen, um, this is really happening. You're going to have to come up with a plan." You know, he said to me, he said, "Brett, listen, to be honest, I was just hoping this would just go away." But it's not, so I'm going to retire. And I
Well,
respect his decision. He's done that, and he's since bought some Bitcoin, and
there you
all
go.
that's good.
Thanks to you. Good advice.
Yeah,
Listen, Brad, it's amazing always talking to you. I always learn so many things. The different this time, we have our audience also be able to hear you talking everything about Coinbase future, Brian's vision, and what you're building under Coinbase Institutional. Again, congratulations with all of the achievements and the market infrastructures. Your very thoughtful intakes, and thank you again for joining us today. For anybody who wants to keep up to date with what Coinbase Institutional is up to, where they should go and find information.
yeah, just to our website. Hit it up or send me an email or whatever. Actually, I don't really mean that on the email. I'm terrible.
Well, making sure you follow Brad on LinkedIn because he's not getting a bit more active on posting stuff. So making sure give him a follow and likes.
All
Anyway,
right.
great to have you, Brad. Thanks very much for joining us. Great sessions. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.
All right. See you, Brad.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.